Hi there, everyone.
Hi, Terry.
Hey, Terry. Hey, Fatih.
I'll give it a couple of minutes for the others to join us.
Good morning. How's everybody today?
Yeah, good, I guess.
All right. Sorry, I'm running behind. Apparently there was some kind of critter. I don't know if it was a raccoon or something, but it woke up the dogs in the middle of the night, and then the dogs were waking everybody else up. So then I slept through my alarm, and it's been a morning. Do we have a Dave Bendery? We do not have a Dave Bendery. Bummer. The agenda today, I think, was we were going to try and do some CD events taxonomy as a working session. Do we have any other CD events folks here?
I'm here. What do you mean with other? So
Oh,
Andrea is
there you go.
supposed to come
Okay.
as well. Yeah, sorry. So Andrea is supposed to come as well, I saw. So I don't know if we should wait for him or if we should start anyway. I can just say before we get going that I need to leave in half an hour, so I just have 30 minutes here.
Okay. Let's see. We'll take a minute while we're waiting, hopefully, for more folks to show up. What's today? How is it the 30th of November? That is madness. Okay, Fatih, Emil. Who else do we have today? How about the folks who have never been here before? Maybe you could give yourself a quick intro.
Yeah, sure. Colin Bowen, I'm the SVP of product at Octopus Deploy, based here in New Zealand.
Ah, Kiwi.
A Canadian in New Zealand, yeah. An escapee of the snow.
I'm sorry, where did you say you were working?
Octopus Deploy.
Octopus Deploy. Okay. Who else is new?
Well, I've been
Yeah, hi,
here
that's
before,
me. Go on, Christopher.
Okay, Frederick. Yeah, I'm one of the maintainers of Jenkins X. I'm from Norway, and I work as a consultant in cowork.no.
Okay, so you don't work at CloudBees, you're just part of the Jenkins X project.
Yeah, there's no cloud base left in Jenkins X. So we have a plan to change the name now, but we can't find the right one. So
branding, Godspeed.
Yeah.
All right. Who else?
Yeah. Hi, my name is Dirk Benzo. I'm working for Fujitsu, and I've been asked to visit the various special interest groups to learn a little bit from my company what's currently going on the various groups, what's the direction of the CD Foundation at the moment, because Fujitsu wants to intensify their efforts in this area, and so I'm I started visiting the Slack discussions and the various meetings, watching videos of previous meetings, and try to learn where you guys are heading to at the moment.
Awesome. Welcome. All right. Robert, have you been here before?
I have not. Thank you. I'm on the CDF Technical Oversight Committee and been hearing about this from Terry and wanted to join. I work at Liquibase.
Okay. Did we get an Andreas or a Dave Bender yet? No, we did not. All right. Well, Emil, since you have a hard stop, how do we best get started on this? The idea was to try and identify, metrics against the state of CD events. So what's measurable that we can correlate to a best practice to start to evolve recommendations that we could document as part of this process. And Terry, if I'm forgetting part of this conversation, please shout out.
Yeah, so there were two parts of this, because the stuff that David was working on was the supply chain maturity piece. We were hoping to tie all of these bits together to get everyone aligned on sort of similar overlapping pieces of work.
Okay. So for those who aren't aware, I'm not sure what the permissions on this is. I'll drop the link here. It's also in the agenda. I'll do a quick share screen. Okay, so here was sort of the origin of this. Pardon, like I said, I'm running late, so breakfast is now. One of the topics here was, out of this discussion, is we have CD events, which is a natural opportunity to have a trace-based measurement, right, from an observability standpoint. So it felt like there was an opportunity here to start to actually put some concrete associations. If you don't have access to this, I think David will have to grant it, but you can put in the request. Let's see, there was, Emil, I think you pointed us at or Terry, one of you last time. There was the list of the CD events. What was that?
You mean to do with the website of CD events?
Yeah, the actual list.
You can go to cdevents.dev. There is a website, cdevents.dev.
That makes it easy.
Okay. In the documentation up there, you see we have some different buckets, and those core events, source code events, continuous integration events, and deployment events. There are 4 different groups of events.
Okay. See how best to do this. I'm trying to see if I can do this. Will Zoom let me do this? Nope. Oh, wait. Ooh. Hey, it worked. I didn't think it was going to do that. Okay. Can you all see that, or is that like really small?
I can see it okay here.
Well, God, Terry, you probably have every possible manner of monitor in existence in your house. Okay. So if we think about, let me break the notes out to here. Sorry, ruthlessly taking advantage of how big my monitor is. All right. No, stop. Okay. All right. So software supply chain maturity model proposal has these categories. Code management, build automation, salsa. Okay. Source code. Code management. All right. So really quick, Emil, pipeline and task run feel very tectonic. Is that intentional?
Yeah, well, the names are strongly influenced by Tecton, but they are intended to be generic enough to manage any kind of, I would call them activity rather, or jobs, which could happen in a pipeline. So it's more of an, orchestration level events on a different dimension from the other events,
related, but not intended to be tightly coupled.
Yeah. And the name, I don't know, the name might change, we don't know. But it's very
Fair enough.
related to Tecton right now. Yeah.
Okay. So I think one thing that we could also probably do in this is try to fill in some questions about what we're actually measuring. So like for code management, we have source code control, review requirements, linting, and static analysis. What are we actually measuring from that? I don't know, Terry, did you and David have some discussion on this that might be helpful in this regard?
Not as yet, no.
Okay. All right, well, let's start doing this.
Tara, are you talking about like metrics that you get from static analysis, or are you just talking about specific things that linting and static analysis is doing?
So the goal of this working session, which again, I really wish David was here, was to try to make concrete associations with key concepts in the service of best practice guidance, right? So, which is a non-answer to your question. So to specifically answer your question, the idea is here is like, hey, if there is a concept of supply chain maturity that we want people to be able to review to say, hey, here's some things to consider. What are some actual things within the CDF that can help you achieve those measurement goals?
Okay.
And here
So in
we're
this
talking
case,
about continuous delivery metrics rather than technical metrics per se. So think DORA rather than just lines of code, if you like.
Good. Okay. Understood.
thank you.
Yeah.
Yes. Because hopefully everybody in this session knows never look at lines of code, but yeah, each target metrics is going to be based on individual organizational needs, right? If you've got like a really old kind of crufty piece of infra or product, as you apply metrics to that, it's probably going to be pretty low. So you don't have to like go for gold your first iteration. But how do you even measure where you're at and what your goals might be is really what we're trying to start to get concrete on here. So for source code code management, see how best can we do this? yeah, see, this is like, what are we going to do here? Let's put a link.
Use it.
Yeah.
That's source code control, use it. What about, there's a lot of stuff a lot of confusion on what goes into source code control. And I've certainly seen, oh, well, no, that doesn't go in source code control. That goes somewhere else. We don't need that over there. I think this group would disagree with that, but, being able to say, no, if it deals with your application from, infrastructure as code all the way up to application code, it all goes in source code control, everything.
You want to give an example of something that people might not initially want to have under revision control? Like if you have a,
well, being that I work at Liquibase, the first one that comes in mind is SQL scripts. But I don't want to make it specific to that. I have certainly seen, oh, well, we don't have to worry about that. That's not part of the application. That's something else. And so I'm thinking like, okay, well, there are some, at some companies, not trying to shame or anything, they got, shell scripts that are sitting on somebody's computer. And that's what this one individual uses to do their job. And it's tucked away on their machine. It's not in source code control. It can't be improved. It's just for that one person, but it is like the basis of this Fortune 500 company. Being able to say, hey, look, if you're using it to deploy your code, I don't care what it is, it needs to be in source code control.
A live example that would be something like a QA tester and their database reset and sample data population scripts. Definitely seen a few QAs carry those around on USB drives.
Yeah, they built it for themselves. And the value here is to sharing it with others. And that's what source code control provides us. I don't know how it fits into this. And I'm wondering if I'm off base here. I'm sorry. I went on too long.
no, this is great. I mean, we came into this with a pretty ambiguous goal, like, because we're just kicking off this type of conversation. I'm sorry, what was that? Who was speaking in that last one about testing? Was that you, Dirk? Or
No, this is me, Colin.
oh, Colin. Hey, Colin,
Yeah.
can you just shout that out again?
Yeah, so the scenarios that we see, because we do some runbook automation around deployments, people will use scripts for resetting databases, generating sample data. Typically, you'll see T-SQL scripts, but they can really be whatever. But they don't see that as part of the core application because, as Robert pointed out, it's like something I wrote for myself to do my job. But actually ends up getting passed around via email, USB keys, and things like that to various QA teams.
Great.
The total foundation of their testing infrastructure on a USB key.
Yeah. I won't name the organization, but yes, yeah. The other, I guess the other aspect of code management beyond kind of those ancillary files around it is we, in a past life, we talked a lot about kind of where in the code base is the most amount of churn. Is this one kind of section of code causing us lots of problem, or we're having to change it on a regular basis? So people look at that kind of turnover within parts of the code base as a sign of maturity or possible problems, or did that surprise me in some way? If I see the stats around that. I think TFS way back when used to even do a code churn report that would show you the most active parts of your code base.
That's a really good. So that's, let's see. I don't remember seeing that in this list. Oh wait, cool. Candidate rollout latencies. No, let's see. Testing maturity.
Yeah, Colin's talking about another level. I was just saying use source code control, but Colin's talking about, all right, well, let's analyze what's going on and see if we can glean insights. So
I'm wondering,
kind of along the same category, same grouping as like, test coverage. Like what percentage of our code base do we actually have automated testing for? It's
that's-
really getting a higher
I'm
order
wondering,
of test of metrics.
Right. I'm wondering if that's actually supply chain though. There's like, well, I guess it could be. It's a little bit ambiguous because when you could think about supply chain as literally the mechanics of software production, or you could think about
True.
supply chain as, you know, end to end from business idea to customer delivery.
It does.
It
does seem more devy.
Yeah, I guess
Yeah.
I guess the way I'd kind of think about it in terms of supply chain is where's my at risk, kind of where's most of my change happening, so that I could identify potential areas of risk. And you could even extend that down to dependencies, like how often are these particular dependencies changing, you know, versus what are the stable parts of my code base that seem to be well developed and not need a lot of maintenance.
Right.
We could also draw a line and just say, look, we're going off the definition of lead time, and it's from when developer checks something in until after
So-
that, whatever happens gets to production. If you want to get super Dora like on it.
Yeah, that would be
So
super
let
dark.
me interject here because I think we're about to go off the rails and we're being
Thank you,
misled
Terry.
by the content that we have here. So let me be really clear. What you're looking at here is an engineering view of continuous deployment, not a best practices view of continuous delivery. Okay, so there are some big chunks missing here relating to product and features, which are the things that you should be measuring against. So there's a big gap here that says, okay, what's the feature that we're supposed to be delivering within our supply chain? When does that feature initiate? Because that's when the clock starts ticking on lead time. And so rather than doing the engineering thing of trying to find a proxy to that information, we should actually have that as a specific event and push it back the other way and say, when does that event occur in your system? Because everything else depends on it.
Roger that. Understood. Thank you.
I capture notes. Hopefully David can come back and look at this.
And I think we can probably put in a top level, you know, the first thing in metrics to consider should be a subtitle, which is, you know, product and features.
Sorry, can you start me off here? I'd switch into suggest mode. So, and then I like lost the track of what you were saying.
Yeah, just stick in a product and features subtitle in there to remind us that we need to identify metrics that are driven from the business, they're coming from the customer, and they're upstream of all of this, but everything that we need to measure actually relates to those things.
I'm not sure
All
how
right.
relevant it is, but isn't it so that, I mean, you talk about requirements now from customers or from somewhere. Isn't it so that, I mean, of course, requirements drive implementation and systemization, but also trouble reports or bugs drive implementations. So upstream from the actual code is both requirements and bugs, I would say. Even though bugs could be, of course, in the other end of the line as well, as the feedback thing from deployment.
Yeah, I mean, that realistically, what you're talking about is the decision to implement something at a commercial level. So, you know, that might be the decision to implement a fix for a bug, or it might be the decision to build an experiment to test a customer behavior. But it's that decision which is the clock starts ticking on lead time.
So I guess when we talk about maturity, it's the maturity on how well you can trace the base for your implementation, or being it features, requirements, or bugs somehow.
Yeah, so this gets back to the nuances that are we focusing on the end to end, or the actual, like, now the train is running. How do we ensure that it's smoothly going from step to step on the path to deployment? Right. And this,
So
gosh,
all the value derives from optimizing for the business behaviors. So the challenge that people always come across, in my experience, is that it's easy to measure things in the code loop, so everybody always goes down that path, and then they're not actually measuring their product behavior, and they're not measuring what's going to the customer. So the maturity model needs to be extended beyond the CI/CD model at both ends.
but to bring it back around, is that something that, again, to close to what we're trying to do here, is that something that is incorporated by CD events?
Well, I think that's
a superset topic.
If CD events is going to deliver value within the context of continuous delivery, then it needs to provide ways of passing those types of events throughout the system. You know, because you're going to need to know how you're going to capture your DORA metrics out of your equipment, and your DORA metrics rely on you having picture than you get from your CI/CD system. So this is CD events is ideal for expanding from that engineering specific view of CI/CD to a much more encompassing end-to-end metrics and observability driven view of continuous delivery.
So a concrete example of that, Terry, would that be, let's say I've got a lending system and it is successfully deployed to a production environment based on a change set that was open, or a PR that was opened, that is about adding this functionality to the system and kind of closing that loop and saying this original event that said PR open, I'm going to make this change for this business purpose, and I've now closed that loop by saying that's now been successfully deployed. Is that the business scenario that you're thinking?
No, the business scenario is broader than that. The business scenario is saying we want to run a commercial experiment to test this idea in the marketplace. So here's a feature that we are going to build. Here's the set of test customers that we're going to deploy it with. And our lead time is actually measured from the point at which we decide to run that experiment with the feature through to the point that it's actually got customers using it. So the difference between that and the CI/CD model is the CI/CD model starts when you write code and ends when you put it in a production environment. But there's a piece on either end that differentiates continuous delivery from just CI/CD.
So, okay, I think I'm still struggling with this because I'm not understanding how CD events, like I understand how CD events is on that inner loop. I'm not understanding how CD events is on that outer loop. I don't know.
Well, CD events is not intended just for CI/CD systems. It's a vocabulary to allow you to communicate with continuous delivery in general. So you can have a business system at the front end that captures your decision to run a particular feature, and it might be triggered by a funding event. You know, we've got sign off to run this experiment on this feature.
Okay, stop on that. So you're saying there should be a CD event that captures that point.
Yeah, so that's it. There's a CD, you can have a CD event that says, you know, a new feature has been initiated as a continuous delivery activity. And then that starts the clock ticking for your lead time calculation under the DORA metrics. And then if you look at the other end of the process, you can put something in a production environment, but you haven't started the experiment until you've let the customer in and they've actually started using the system. So there's another piece at the other end, which is observability on the platform that says there's actual activity going on consuming this this service or feature.
Emil, what was your comment?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, so far we haven't looked at any earlier stages than when a source code commit comes in the CD events definitions of events. We have something in the pipe coming in, which we will call, is it issue defined or something, where we intend to show that a bug or something has happened. And that could also be probably a feature, but that's not defined yet, as far as I know, at least. But I was thinking of under this metrics to consider heading there are subheadings, and they are what SIG interoperability referred to as stages, I would say. And I think what we talked about there before on features and such, that's on an earlier stage than build. And I think all of these stages, they start somehow with some event or occurrence. And I would say that the build stage or the build maturity thing here would start with a commit coming in. And then of course there are things before that commit is even done or published somewhere, which is then about systemizing a piece of work and such things. So I was thinking, I don't know if we could use those terminology terms which have been defined by the SIG interoperability for the different stages, and then to see what actually is part of those stages. I pasted it in the chat there, the link to that recommended. Because there it says, for example, in the build stage that an input to that stage is a software source change then, which means that the build stage doesn't start until we have a software source in place. So it's not what we're talking about at the beginning there. It's not really about what is the coverage, how much of our data, of our source files are in source change or in SCM systems or not. That's not really part of the build stage. That's something maybe that comes as a stage before that, or another kind of metric. So I'm a bit now when it says source code control there under the build maturity, it's a bit strange to me to talk about how much of our source code is under control as a metric within the build maturity stage, or whatever we should call it, box.
I'll drop a note in there.
So I think
Spelling your name wrong. I don't know how to do the A with the umlauts or whatever that.
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay. All right.
Do you follow my line of thinking there?
I do think some form of reconciliation would be really helpful, particularly for different areas of CDF where we're essentially talking about the same thing. We do definitely want to have the same language. Hey, Andrea, how are you?
Hi, I'm fine, thanks. Sorry I'm late today.
You're tired. It's a joke. Sorry. I say this to my org. First time I did it, I got a bunch of wide-eyed looks. I remembered, oh, right, you're a VP. You shouldn't make jokes like that. I'm trying to capture all these good notes.
Yeah, so Andrea, you just came in after I think Terry mentioned that the CD events kind of come into play after some business feature has been requested to be made. So there's kind of a level outside of the CD events that perhaps needs to be captured in there as well. And I think I see what you're talking about, Terry, because typically you have like an issue management system like Jira or GitHub issues or something where you define your issues. Then you want to see where is that issue now, what's happening with it, and is it in production and has it been tested and so on.
So
Makes sense to me.
the big challenge for lots of customers is that they don't have any way to really measure their DORA metrics in an automated sense, because the scope of the DORA metrics sits in the business domain, in the commercial domain, not in the software delivery piece. So as a result, there are no good standard hooks to hang this stuff on. So I think one of the big drivers for adoption of CD events would be that it provides a way in which you can start to really automate the measurement of your DORA metrics, because it provides a way to pass those types of events through the build process and get them out the other end and extend them past, so that you're getting the full scope of the information you need, not just the engineering bit in the middle.
I dropped a note on, I think there's just like, what are we talking about when we talk about supply chain? I think we really need a good consensus around what the definition of that, what's the scope there. So I left that in there.
So
Okay.
we've got a definition for that in best practices.
Right. I mean, as part of this supply chain maturity, to make sure that if it's that definition, actually, let's see, SIG best. There we go. You remember where that is?
It's 4 up from the bottom.
We're up from
On the left menu.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Okay.
And this is we've had to do more work on the best practices side, because people have started using supply chain as a shortcut for software supply chain security, which is only one of at least 4 major areas that actually impact software supply chain as a problem space. So licensing, in regulatory compliance, and in software lifecycle, as well as the security aspects. And we're going to see a lot of benefit from being able to pass things like lifecycle events up and down the software supply chain as another input that exists prior to your CI/CD system kicking in, and hope to receive a lot of information in the future about behaviors and changes in your software supply chain, because your suppliers will be passing those events to you in real time.
If we're lucky. All right. So how are we doing for time? All right. In the service of trying to get something concrete that we could hash out on, and we lost Emil, right? Okay. Are there okay, so I can go in after the fact and make the associations between the events, the current event standard and this. Are there other gaps that people may see in this list that we want to call out for review? So code churn came up. What is code, I think, is the other, going back to like the test tooling, shell script, etc. There's, of course, the broader, what's the scope of supply chain, the pre-commit, post-deploy bits. What else? This has been a great discussion, by the way. This is, I think, one of the best discussions we've had in a while. This is awesome. Are there other kind of gap areas that would be a measurable part of this process that might be missing here? Oh, and by the way, Andrea, do you have the link to this? Here, let me drop. Since you joined late, you may not have seen it. There you go.
Thank you.
So under that dependency management section, we're definitely missing a supply chain events flag there. Might be life cycle events as another way of putting it. But.
And what would that encompass?
Well, that's things like, a new version of a library that you depend on is available, or the library you depend on has been deprecated. Those types of events. And then there will also be security related events, so new CVE on something that you depend on.
I'm wondering if this dependency inventory, dependency verification is meant to encompass that, but that's very vague. Inventory. But upgrades, ELLs, LTS changes, CVEs, similar. Was there another one that you said? That's well, etc. There we go.
Yeah, that's fine.
That'll work. I think this is a little bit unclear. I suspect it's probably meant to be handled by that, but we should tighten up the language. Okay.
So, and it might help us to keep flipping backwards and forwards by looking at this from a top-down view as well as a bottom-up view. So what we're trying to do with this piece of work is help quantify someone's organizational maturity in continuous delivery. And so we're trying to find what are the differentiators, what are the key points that differentiate between a mature organization and a less mature organization. We've almost defined already a clear differentiator, which is that a mature organization will be thinking about this as a product to customer problem, and a less mature organization will be thinking source code control to production problem.
You
so
got
that's
your audio's starting to
that's
do a little thing again, Terry, just FYI.
okay. Thanks.
Max headroom.
Right, I've cut over to a different channel.
There we go. Okay, so
Did you
just
get that?
can you say it again? I got part of it. Could you restate it just so we capture?
So, just as a very coarse rule of thumb, a mature organization will be approaching continuous delivery from product to customer, whereas a less mature organization will be thinking about it in an engineering perspective from source code to production. And so that's almost like the level one decision of, have you entered onto the maturity hierarchy yet? Is, are you still thinking about this as an engineering problem, or are you thinking about it as a delivering features to customers problem? And then you get into the finer differentiations of how effectively you're doing that and how quickly you're doing it.
It's almost like, so if we think about something like this, for example, like this is on the engineering side, right? Ideally, or realistically, it's really focused on the mechanics versus this, which probably is more encompassing of the thing that you're alluding to.
Yeah, so it's like at a basic level of maturity, you should be thinking about features to customer. At a higher level of maturity, you should be pushing your knowledge right the way out into your supply chain, so that a very mature organization is getting information about changes in its dependencies in real time and using that to trigger changes in its asset management for its product. So what we'll see as we start to evolve CD events to finer and finer granularity is there'll be a need to react to lots of different types of supply chain events coming into the system, so that those can be used to trigger activities in the middle. And then we'll almost certainly find things that are outputs from our system that are the source of those events to customers further down the supply chain from us. Because software supply chain is a fractal problem. It's the same patterns at every scale. So when we're thinking about what we need to consume from our suppliers, we also need to be providing to our customers because we're in their supply chain.
And to be clear, when we talk about the higher level maturity and thinking about the broader inputs, that would be, for example, also include like business decision. Like, so if there was, I'm just going to make something up here. If there was a organizational policy that all new products or features used some templatized mechanism for being created that could trigger an event that would actually alert. Like, are you kind of talking about that level of instrumentation? I'm just trying to understand the scope of what you're proposing.
Well, classic examples here are ideally what you want to be doing is working towards a situation where your continuous delivery process can be smart enough to make certain classes of decision for you. So if you have a CVE of a certain severity on one of your dependencies,
the build system should be smart enough to immediately attempt to upgrade that package and rebuild while it's notifying someone of that event, so that by the time someone gets around to looking at it, there's already a preview version in place saying, here's the solution with the new version of the library in it, and it all builds correctly and all the tests pass. So should we put it into production?
All right, that's okay. That's not what I thought you said. That's a really good clarification. Thank you. Build in, okay. Capturing notes. Cool. All right.
As a general principle, automation in continuous delivery as a methodology is about eliminating the fog of war. So it's about taking the reliance on people having an end-to-end understanding of what's going on and pushing as much of that into the system as possible. So rather than having people telling the system what to do, the system is advising people of what it's done in reaction to things that are happening in the world.
Okay, so to put a more concrete example and tying it back to CD events, and great, Andrea's here so he can yell at me when I say this totally wrong. So we have a supply chain that involves a Kubernetes cluster or 5 using the Tecton as a declarative description of what that cluster is supposed to incorporate. The mature model would say that an incoming CVE for whatever the base distro image is would trigger a waterfall effect of whatever the policy is for staging, rebuilding that container, staging it in some canary deployment, and triggering a set of notifications that says that this thing is ongoing. Utilizing, for example, CD events tied into the overarching pipeline, because the pipeline declaration is that, or that it includes the idea that everything is up to date as an implemented policy.
Yeah, and I think we should probably just make it really explicit that CD events is declarative, not imperative. So CD events are all about saying this has happened or this needs to happen, and it's not about saying do X or do Y.
Right. Okay.
And the idea is that if you have enough of these events, you can build a really smart system that is reactive to all of this knowledge that's being provided to it all of the time. But there's limited value in that knowledge within the CI/CD scope, but it's easiest, it's low-hanging fruit, so that's where we started. But the real value is once that starts to spread out into the full continuous delivery problem space, because that's where nobody's got a good technical solution yet. And as soon as we start to enable that, there's a whole new market opens up for new product integration.
Yeah, about what you said, Terry, for several events, I just wanted to mention we had an interesting presentation from SAS and the SIG events group, where they introduced how they're using events today. And I think one of the central components they have in their architecture is a component that is able to basically accumulate events that are sent by the different parties and apply policies so that you can do this kind of automation. Say, okay, well, if I receive this set of events that match this sort of policy that I defined, then I'm going to trigger a certain part of my workflow as a consequence of that, right? And yeah, I think this is what similar to what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And that's something that we, yeah.
Is there a write-up or a recording of that? That sounds really interesting.
There is certainly a recording. I can find the link and send it to you, Sarah.
Awesome. You said that was SAS?
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Let me know when you have a link and I'll get that tracked. Cool. We are down to the last couple of minutes. Wow, there's a lot. Any other interesting ideas that we want to drop as either comment for Dave Bendry or a future topic to dig in? I think we have a lot of topics that we can continue to dig in on, but
Real quick one. I just, in this whole time I was thinking, what about the things that are manual that we can't capture with an API? And how does that play into this? Because I go back to I forget who said it, if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. And one of the challenges is those manual steps in not so continuous delivery. How do we shine a light on that with CD events? Like maybe a blocker between it? Anyway, just wanted to, that's where my head was at. And I don't know if that's means anything here, but just certainly in my world, I see that a lot.
do you have an example?
Yeah,
I mean, I could think
like Colin's example with the USB key, like, oh, it's now in test, but somebody has to manually do this thing before that release is deployed and testing is started. How do you track? What's the event there? Because at the end of the day, we're trying to provide data to users to improve their continuous delivery process. And I'm wondering how that plays in, if at all. If it doesn't, okay. But I'm just thinking about those manual steps that only that one QA engineer with the USB key knows. Tons of examples, but that's one I got right now.
Yeah, the one that I can think of that was a pain. And now there's better ways of doing it, but I can imagine many companies still have the situation that for certain types of artifacts or instance access, let's say you're in a super highly regulated environment and you have a requirement for compliance reasons that requires you've got the nuclear 2-key thing, right? Like we had where it's like the security engineers had one key, but the CISO distinctly had the other key. We needed both in order to access the Bastion host in order to do a thing, right?
Yeah.
And you know, sometimes you think, well, just don't do that, do it this other way. But there, you know, while you're still required to do that for business reasons, how do you account for it? Right. I don't think we want
there.
Yeah. I don't think we want to include CD events working on hardware drivers as a feature.
Oh yeah, agreed. But I'm just a thought experiment. Does this group just say no, don't care about it, or do we try to infer that from the stuff before and after that event? Maybe.
So for CD events, I mean, we definitely talked about manual things, but I don't know if that's the kind of manual events that you're thinking about. So, I mean, for like, if I'm running a test manually, I probably need to report that result somewhere, and then I would need to have a system where test results are tracked, sending a CD event for that, even if the source.
Yeah, that sucks. That's such, having people to do timesheets, you know. I don't have an answer for this, but I'm just saying that it's just a really tough problem. And if we really want to, as a best practice, provide really clear insights to users, something to consider. I don't have a solution.
So I'm remembering for and maybe some of you who've been Jenkins folks in the past, there was, I think it was part of Blue Ocean, but there was a mechanism by which you could insert into the pipeline process a manual input, where it's like the continuous integration flow would go, and then there would be a widget that would basically, like, at this point, a person has to do a thing, and they would go into the Jenkins, UI and hit the button, and then things would progress. It was like a Q engineer had to sign off that, because there was like flaky tests and other types of stuff, and so they wanted a human in the automation, but they wanted most of it to be automated. I was like, well, that's kind of genius. This is like, I don't know, 7-8 years ago. But you can imagine, like, in a CD event pipeline that basically sends an event or publishes an event that gets captured by maybe an element in the Kubernetes control plane that says hit the button. I don't know that we actually want to do that, but one could imagine there's a variety of scenarios where something like that could be useful. Maybe it's through notifications, with email, which is terrible, or a Slack bot, or but a notification mechanism that someone could choose to attach some kind of interactive mechanism that would the pipeline would just be waiting for it to happen.
It's also, again, worth going back to the methodology. But if we look at the classic example of where continuous delivery came from, it's okay. I'm a startup. I've got a theory about what a customer might want. Here's an experiment to test their behavior. I'll build that experiment. I'll deploy it. I'll run the experiment for a week, collect customer data, and then my experiment is finished when I've analyzed the data at the end of that week. So if you think about it that way, you've got downstream events that you can actually be getting from your deployed application. So the application says, I've started. The application says, I'm being used. The application says, I've collected a week's worth of data. And then you can even push it further down into your analysis tools to say, okay, we've finished the analysis on that week's worth of data. If you're pushing your events that far out, then any manual processes are dark spots on that journey, but you can always be testing to see if you've got the next event that you expected to happen back in the automated world. And that's how a lot of manual workflow processes work. Case management for law firms, for example, riddled with manual processes, but they all have expectations. So you say, here's a manual process that started on this date, and we're now waiting to receive this event in the form of somebody putting in more information in a month's time. If that event doesn't occur within this time window, we'll raise an alert. So you start to use predictive behaviors about what the system should do to carry you over the dark spots that are your manual processes.
Okay. Infer from before. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, Tara.
No, close that thought, because I was going to circle back to a previous tangent.
Oh, so inferring from the length of the manual process, whether it's started or stopped in the amount of time based on the steps before and after. That's reasonable. No argument. Thank you.
And then I was thinking, going back to the previous example where it's like somebody has to put the USB key in or whatever, if there is a environment, like if there's like an organizational policy that those things have to happen within a certain amount of time, like, hey, this deployment pipeline event process is happening. Somebody, there's a QA person who's essentially the on-call for the validation, and they have 24 hours or 4 hours or whatever. There could
Some
also be an
SLA, yeah.
So yeah, an internal SLA. There's okay, so I didn't even think about, but that's all measurable, right? So even the
Well,
manual
here's-
stuff.
But I guarantee you this, and I see this with DBAs all the time, production DBA SLA for a push to production, typically 72 hours.
Yeah.
The average time that they use, you go back to ticketing system, 71.5 hours. It's like, it's like my 12-year-old son. It's like last possible moment. But it's human nature. And that ain't good. That ain't good.
Okay. Well, this was a lively discussion, and we are over time. Apologies for that. I was not tracking quickly. I think we'll probably keep hammering on this. Drop comments in there or however you want to participate in the supply chain maturity model document. Keep thinking the good thoughts, and let's keep this conversation going.
Thank you for leading us. I appreciate it.
Oh no, I'm just the
Thanks, everyone.
secretary. Terry's the
Thank you.
lead.
That's leadership. There you go.
Very
Right.
good.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.